Imagine this. You're standing in front of someone whose smile feels like sunlight, whose words seem warm, whose gestures are polite. Yet beneath the surface, your body is whispering something different. Your chest tightens. Your breath grows shallow. Your stomach knots for no clear reason. It's as if an ancient part of you already knows the truth your mind refuses to acknowledge. She isn't safe. This moment is not about paranoia or overreaction. It's about instinct, that primal wisdom buried in the nervous system, carrying messages that logic is too slow to interpret. This is the terrain where the feminine archetype of the silent oracle emerges. She is the aspect of the psyche that perceives beyond appearances, that feels what is hidden, that senses danger in silence. The oracle does not argue with facts, nor does she wait for evidence. She moves with intuition, a wisdom sharpened by centuries of ancestral survival. Yet in the modern world, this oracle is often silenced. Social conditioning teaches politeness, tells women to ignore their discomfort, insists that being agreeable is safer than trusting instinct. And so the warning signals are buried until the body begins to scream. Carl Jung once described the shadow as everything the conscious mind refuses to see. When you sense unease in another, you may be brushing against their shadow, the unintegrated parts of themselves they project outward. It might arrive as charm that feels rehearsed, as a voice that sounds sweet but carries an undercurrent of hunger, as attentiveness that presses too close. Your body detects the inconsistency, even if your mind tries to rationalize it away. That dissonance is the shadow leaking through. The silent oracle within you notices immediately, though the ego often insists on ignoring her. The ego prefers the comfort of appearances. It tells you, she seems kind, she has done nothing wrong, don't be dramatic. Yet beneath these justifications, the nervous system continues to react. This is the paradox of perception. The mind clings to civility while the body wrestles with truth. Stoic wisdom reminds us that impressions strike us first, involuntarily, like a spark of lightning. The choice, however, lies in whether we consent to those impressions, whether we dismiss or honor them. To ignore the body's first warning is to abandon the oracle, and with her, the possibility of sovereignty. Why is it so hard to trust this inner signal? Because acknowledging danger often demands confrontation. To admit that someone is unsafe is to disrupt harmony, to risk conflict, to step outside the mask of the agreeable. Many abandon themselves in such moments, choosing comfort over clarity. Yet self-betrayal has a cost. Every time you silence your intuition, you teach your body that its voice does not matter. You erode trust in yourself. And in that erosion, the silent oracle retreats into shadow, leaving you vulnerable to cycles of entanglement and regret. But when the oracle is honored, a different story unfolds. The moment your chest tightens, you pause. The moment your stomach knots, you step back. The moment your breath shortens, you listen. This simple act of choosing to trust your body's message becomes an act of power. It is not paranoia but protection, not hysteria but clarity. It is the restoration of the feminine instinct that the world has tried to domesticate into silence. You reclaim not only safety but dignity. You stand as the sovereign of your inner world. Consider how many women throughout history were told that their perceptions were false. How many were labeled hysterical, irrational, too emotional. This suppression was not accidental, it was systemic. Because a woman who listens to her inner oracle cannot be controlled. She cannot be gaslit because she trusts her body's truth over another's words. She cannot be seduced by flattery because she senses the hunger beneath it. She cannot be manipulated into self-betrayal because she chooses alignment over approval. This power unsettles those who seek domination, and so it was exiled, mocked, dismissed. Yet exile does not mean death. The oracle never disappears. She waits in silence, patient until you are ready to remember her. The more you quiet external noise, the clearer her voice becomes. The more you value your embodied wisdom, the louder her guidance grows. She does not scream, she whispers. She does not demand, she invites. Her truth is steady, ancient, woven into the very rhythm of your breath. And when you stand in her presence, you realize that safety is not something others grant you. Safety begins when you trust yourself. But here lies the question. What happens when you finally decide to listen, when you refuse to betray your body's wisdom again? When you choose to listen, the world begins to shift. Suddenly, every interaction feels layered with texture. The words people speak no longer exist in isolation. You feel the tone beneath, the subtle cadence of intention. The pause is heavy with what was not said. Your body becomes a compass, tilting toward or away from others with quiet certainty. This is not paranoia but perception. It is the silent oracle opening her eyes within you, restoring your access to a faculty you were always meant to carry. In Jungian terms, this awakening is the reconciliation of shadow and self. For so long, the shadow of self-betrayal lurked beneath your choices, compelling you to dismiss the unease that arose in your chest. Now the light of consciousness turns toward it. You recognize how often you traded inner truth for outer peace. You see the archetypal pattern, the pleaser, the caretaker, the woman who sacrifices her own clarity to maintain fragile bonds. These masks begin to crumble the moment you choose self-trust. For the ego, it feels like death, but for the soul, it is birth. The Stoics teach that freedom lies in the distinction between what is within your control and what is not. You cannot control whether another harbors ill intent. You cannot command honesty where deception reigns, but you can control the sanctity of your boundaries. You can choose not to linger where your breath constricts. You can step away when the smile in front of you does not reach the eyes. This, too, is a form of sovereignty, accepting that the external world may deceive, but the body does not. There is a deep beauty in the way the oracle speaks through sensation. Her language is subtle, not verbal. She speaks in goosebumps when the room grows heavy, in clenched jaws when a conversation veers false, in sudden waves of fatigue when someone drains your energy. These signals are not random. They are the unconscious communicating directly with your nervous system. Jung would call this the wisdom of the self, the totality of the psyche reaching into consciousness through instinct. To ignore it is to fragment. To honor it is to heal. But this healing is not only personal, it is archetypal. Across generations, women were trained to doubt themselves, to defer judgment, to trust others before their own perception. Mothers taught daughters to be polite even when unsafe. Communities praised obedience while punishing intuition. To reclaim the oracle is to break this lineage. It is to become the first woman in your bloodline who says, "My body's truth is sacred. I will not abandon it again." And in that act, you heal backward as much as forward. Ancestors exiled into silence stir awake within you, their voices restored. Still, this reclamation is not without resistance. The ego fights back with rationalizations. She is just stressed. You are imagining things. Don't be rude. These defenses are crafted from years of conditioning, a survival strategy designed to avoid disapproval. Yet what is the cost of such civility? How many betrayals must occur before the lesson is learned, that no mask of politeness is worth the price of your own safety? Every time you override instinct, you rehearse self-abandonment. And every time you honor it, you rehearse freedom. Freedom feels unfamiliar at first. It feels like saying no without explanation, like leaving without apology, like drawing a boundary that others do not understand. The ego trembles, fearing rejection, fearing exile from belonging. But the oracle does not fear exile, for she has always lived in it. She knows that true belonging cannot be built on denial. She knows that intimacy without safety is only entrapment. And she knows that sovereignty requires sacrifice. The sacrifice of approval, of harmony, of the illusion that all is well. This is where power begins to take form. Not the power of domination, but the power of discernment. You begin to see people as they are, not as they pretend to be. You sense the archetypes they embody, the predator cloaked in charm, the wounded child seeking rescue, the trickster speaking in riddles. This discernment does not come with bitterness, but with clarity. You no longer confuse attraction with safety, attention with love, or flattery with respect. You see the shadow in others, because you have dared to face the shadow in yourself. And yet, there is still a question that haunts the edges of awareness. If your body knew she wasn't safe before your mind did, what other truths has your body known all along, waiting for you to finally listen? Your body has always carried the truth, long before the mind dared to speak it. Think back to the first moments of betrayal, not the obvious ones but the subtle. The friend who laughed a little too loudly at your vulnerability. The lover whose touch felt hungry rather than tender. The family member who smiled while their words sliced. Your mind justified, excused, explained. But your body never forgot. It stored the dissonance in muscle, in breath, in posture. Like tree rings recording drought and storm, your very flesh became a library of truths ignored. This is why Jung insisted that the body is not separate from the psyche. The unconscious lives in the flesh as much as in dreams. Every tension in the shoulders, every knot in the stomach, every shallow inhale is a form of communication. The silent oracle does not speak in sentences but in symptoms. Anxiety, fatigue, numbness, these are not enemies but signals. They are the shadow knocking, insisting to be seen. The longer they are suppressed, the louder they become, until they erupt as illness, breakdown, or despair. But when honored, they dissolve into wisdom. Consider how many have been trained to fear these signals. A woman feels unease and is told she is overreacting. She feels anger and is called hysterical. She feels sadness and is told to smile. Over time, she learns that survival depends on suppressing her truth. This is not weakness, it is adaptation. Yet adaptation cuts deep. It fractures the connection between the oracle and the conscious self. What remains is a woman who smiles while burning inside, who says yes while her body screams no, who stays silent while her soul begs for escape. This fracture is not just personal, it is archetypal. The archetype of the silent oracle is born in this fracture. She is silenced externally but alive internally. She watches quietly, recording every tremor of falseness, every flicker of threat. She never leaves, even when ignored. Her presence is like a dream you cannot quite remember, haunting, insistent. She waits for the moment you turn inward and ask, "What is it that I already know but refuse to admit?" And when that question is asked sincerely, she answers not with words, but with clarity that floods like a storm breaking the dam. The Stoics, too, knew this tension between appearance and truth. Marcus Aurelius warned against being deceived by surfaces, urging the soul to look beyond ornament to essence. The body does exactly that. It sees essence before the mind rationalizes surface. It senses the hidden hunger in a kind voice, the concealed cruelty behind a compliment. This capacity is not irrationality, it is survival intelligence, older than civilization. To deny it is to deny your own nature. To embrace it is to align with the rhythm of life itself. And yet alignment demands courage. For the moment you listen, excuses dissolve. You can no longer pretend that someone's charm is harmless, that their intentions are pure, that their closeness is safe. You must face the possibility of withdrawal, of confrontation, of being misunderstood. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to value truth over illusion. Each time you honor the oracle, you choose not comfort, but authenticity. And authenticity is the birthplace of sovereignty. Sovereignty feels like finally sitting on the throne of your own life. It feels like trusting the tightening in your chest as a decree, not a distraction. It feels like refusing to barter intuition for approval. Sovereignty does not mean isolation. It means connection without self-betrayal. For when you honor your own signals, you begin to attract those who honor them too. You call forth relationships grounded not in manipulation, but in mutual respect. The paradox is this: once you trust the oracle, the very signals that once terrified you become your greatest guides. The anxiety that warned you becomes gratitude for the wisdom that saved you. The tension that pushed you away becomes reverence for the clarity that protected you. What was once dismissed as irrational becomes sacred compass. Your body ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a temple. And in that temple, you are both priestess and protector. But the question remains, lingering like a candle's flicker in the dark. If your body has always carried truth, what would your life look like if you vowed from this day forward never to betray it again? To vow never to betray your body again is to step into a kind of initiation. It is the beginning of a sacred contract between the self you show the world and the deeper self who has always waited in silence. Few choose this path because it demands the death of illusions. The illusion that safety is granted by others. The illusion that harmony is maintained by compliance. The illusion that love requires self-erasure. These are comfortable masks, but masks cannot breathe. To remove them is frightening, yet to keep them is suffocating. In the archetypal language, this is the threshold of the shadowed flame. The flame is the part of the feminine psyche that burns in hidden places, illuminating truths others wish to keep concealed. It is the fire of instinct, the light of the silent oracle made visible. But fire is disruptive. It does not politely ask for space. It consumes what no longer belongs. When you vow to trust your body, you ignite this flame. And everything that cannot withstand the fire, false bonds, manipulative entanglements, masks of compliance, must fall away. The Stoics would remind us here, what burns away was never truly yours. To grieve the loss of illusions is natural, but to cling to them is folly. Seneca wrote that life is long if you know how to use it. Wasting it on self-betrayal is the greatest theft. Every time you silence the body's wisdom, you give away a fragment of your life to falsehood. But when you honor it, you reclaim time, energy, and sovereignty. You begin to live not as a shadow of yourself, but as the flame itself, bright, undeniable, alive. Notice how powerfully this changes relationships. Where once you tolerated unease, now you withdraw. Where once you explained away disrespect, now you name it. Where once you sought to be chosen, now you choose. This reversal terrifies those who profited from your silence. They may accuse you of arrogance, of cruelty, of selfishness. But such accusations are confessions. They reveal not who you are, but what you will no longer endure. To stand firm in the face of them is to finally protect the oracle that was silenced for too long. And something remarkable happens in this firmness. The very body that once trembled in warning now settles in peace. Shoulders unclench, breath deepens. The nervous system, no longer forced to scream, begins to sing. The body was never your enemy, it was your fiercest guardian. It carried you through danger with warnings disguised as discomfort. The vow to trust it is not merely self-care, it is self-redemption. It is the act of telling your younger self, you were right all along. And in that moment, 1,000 past betrayals begin to heal. Yet the oracle is not content with mere protection. She desires creation. For once you have learned to trust her warnings, you must also learn to trust her invitations. The same body that contracts around danger also expands toward joy. The same chest that tightens against threat also opens in safety. The same stomach that knots in fear also softens in love. Trusting your body means not only retreating from what harms you, but also stepping fully into what nourishes you. This is the next stage of sovereignty, not just survival, but flourishing. Flourishing requires risk. It demands stepping into relationships where vulnerability is mutual, where trust is earned, where presence is real. To trust your expansion is just as daunting as trusting your contraction. For if the body was dismissed when it warned of harm, it was also dismissed when it longed for joy. How many moments of aliveness were abandoned out of fear of looking foolish, of being too much, of risking rejection? How many doors to intimacy remained closed because the oracle's whisper of longing was silenced as irrational? The vow, then, is complete only when you say, "I will not betray my body in pain, and I will not betray my body in pleasure. I will trust the contraction and the expansion, the warning and the longing." To live this vow is to walk as the flame, undaunted, discerning, radiant. You no longer seek permission to feel safe, nor to feel joy. You become the authority of your inner world, and from this authority arises the kind of woman who cannot be possessed, only respected. But as this vow deepens, another question rises with it, one that cuts even closer to the core. If you truly trusted both your fear and your desire, who would you stop betraying, and who would you finally become? To stop betraying yourself is to walk into unfamiliar territory, a landscape where many never dare to tread. It is the place where the masks fall and the raw self stands unguarded. This territory feels both terrifying and liberating because here you cannot pretend. Every yes is real, every no is absolute, every choice is aligned. To live here is to become both fierce and tender, fierce in boundaries, tender in truth. And this fusion, though rare, is the essence of sovereignty. Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole, of integrating what has been exiled. In this path, the silent oracle is no longer buried in shadow. She steps forward as guide, not just warning against danger, but illuminating the path of becoming. To ignore her is to live fragmented, always torn between appearance and essence. But to integrate her is to live whole, unified in body and psyche. Wholeness does not mean perfection, it means authenticity. It means you no longer fracture yourself to fit into places unworthy of you. The Stoics spoke of virtue as alignment with nature, with the logos, the rational order of existence. Your body is part of that order. Its signals are not mistakes but messages. To override them is to live out of harmony with nature itself. To honor them is to move with the grain of reality. This is why ignoring intuition feels heavy and exhausting, while honoring it feels light and powerful. You are no longer swimming against the current of truth, you are carried by it. The silent oracle and the Stoic sage meet here, in the river of alignment. Alignment reshapes desire itself. No longer do you crave what wounds you, no longer do you chase shadows disguised as love. The body, once dulled by suppression, becomes sharp with discernment. What once enticed you now feels empty. What once left you restless now feels beneath you. Desire becomes a compass toward growth, not a chain toward ruin. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of projection dissolving, the moment you stop mistaking others for the missing pieces of yourself. Instead, you stand complete, desiring not rescue but resonance. And resonance changes everything. It is the experience of standing in the presence of another whose energy feels like oxygen. Your body expands without fear. Your breath deepens without hesitation. You feel not drained but nourished, not anxious but alive. This is what happens when you no longer betray your body. You attract relationships that feel like safety embodied. You magnetize people who do not ask you to abandon yourself, but who celebrate the oracle within you. Resonance is not accidental. It is the natural reward of alignment. Yet even here, temptation lingers. The world still pressures you to conform, to silence yourself for comfort, to trade sovereignty for acceptance. The old patterns call out like sirens. Don't be difficult. Don't make waves. Don't walk away. These voices echo in family, culture, and memory. But now you see them clearly for what they are, relics of control. The silent oracle does not fear these voices. She listens, smiles, and remains unmoved. For she knows that every compromise of self returns you to exile. and she has no interest in banishment again. This is where empowerment deepens into legacy. By honoring your body's wisdom, you do more than heal yourself. You create a model for others. Daughters, sisters, friends, even strangers witness the way you move. They see boundaries held without apology, truth spoken without tremor, instincts trusted without doubt. And something awakens in them. Perhaps a memory of their own silent oracle, waiting to be remembered. You become not just a sovereign woman, but a catalyst, a living archetype who gives others permission to return to themselves. And so the vow is no longer personal, it becomes collective. Each act of self-trust strengthens a lineage that was fractured for centuries. Each refusal to betray yourself heals wounds inherited from generations of silenced women. Each choice of authenticity over illusion reweaves the fabric of the feminine. The oracle is not only your guide, she is the guide of all who choose to awaken. To embody her is to join a lineage of flame bearers who refuse to be extinguished. Yet here arises a piercing question, one that echoes through every choice you will make. If your sovereignty could awaken not only yourself but an entire lineage, would you dare to carry that responsibility? Responsibility, when seen through the archetypal lens, is not a burden but a crown. To carry it is to step into the role of the high priestess, the one who moves between worlds, who hears both the whispers of the unconscious and the cries of the living. She does not seek this position. It is bestowed by necessity. When a woman chooses to trust her body, to live aligned with her silent oracle, she becomes a vessel through which collective healing flows. Her personal sovereignty becomes a beacon others cannot ignore. But this crown is heavy at first. Responsibility strips away excuses. You can no longer hide in the comfort of self-doubt. You cannot pretend you did not feel the tightening in your chest, the unease in your breath, the subtle warning that spoke before thought. To deny it now would feel like betrayal not only of yourself, but of every woman silenced before you. And so you begin to carry your truth not as a private possession, but as a sacred duty. The weight of this duty shapes you into something unyielding. Jung teaches that archetypes live not in isolation but in balance. The high priestess must hold both light and shadow, both clarity and mystery. To embody her is to resist the temptation of extremes. You do not become hardened, distrusting all who approach, nor do you return to naivety, blind to threat. Instead, you walk the middle path of discernment. You open when your body expands and you close when it contracts. You trust not appearances but essence. This is not cynicism. It is wisdom born of integration. The Stoics remind us that such balance is the essence of virtue. They warn against being ruled by fear, but also against being ruled by desire. The sovereign woman is ruled by neither. She is guided by her inner oracle, yet disciplined by her reason. She does not indulge every impulse, nor suppress every instinct. Instead, she listens, weighs, discerns, and acts. This union of instinct and reason is what creates unshakable presence. Others feel it when she enters a room. They may not name it, but they sense it, the gravity of a woman who cannot be deceived. Such presence transforms relationships. No longer do you waste time decoding contradictions, doubting what you feel, second-guessing your perceptions. Instead, you move with clarity. If a person's presence unsettles you, you step away without apology. If their energy nourishes you, you lean in without fear. This clarity confuses those who rely on manipulation, but it liberates those who long for authenticity. It filters your world, leaving only what resonates with truth. And yet, even as discernment sharpens, tenderness deepens. For when you learn to trust your own signals, you begin to see others' signals too. You notice the way their shoulders tense when they silence themselves, the way their breath shortens when they betray their own truth. You recognize their shadow because you have faced your own. This recognition does not lead to judgment but to compassion. You no longer project your needs onto others. you witness them as they are. Sovereignty is not isolation, it is intimacy without illusion. The paradox of sovereignty is that it makes you more connected, not less. By no longer betraying yourself, you create space for true connection to emerge. You can finally meet others without distortion, without the desperate need to be chosen, without the fear of abandonment. You are already whole. From this wholeness, you can give without losing, receive without clinging. This is the gift of individuation, the ability to stand alone and thus to stand truly with another. But as you stand in this clarity, the world shifts around you. Old patterns return to test your vow. Shadows disguised as safety reappear, asking if you are still willing to listen. Temptations of silence whisper, it would be easier not to know. And it would. But easy has never been the path of the oracle. She is not here to make you comfortable. She is here to make you free. And freedom, as Marcus Aurelius warned, comes only through discipline, through the courage to choose truth again and again, even when it hurts. And so the question that lingers is this: when the test returns, when comfort and clarity stand before you, which will you choose, and what will that choice make of you? Every test is a mirror placed before you to reveal whether your vow holds firm or crumbles under pressure. In these moments, the world asks not who you wish to be, but who you truly are. Will you abandon your own signals in exchange for fleeting approval, or will you remain loyal to the oracle, even if it costs you belonging? This tension is the crucible of sovereignty. In it, the false self melts away, and the authentic self begins to take shape. Jung described this as the confrontation with the shadow, the place where the masks you have worn, obedient, agreeable, pleasing, are stripped from your grasp. Each mask once served a purpose. They protected you in hostile environments, they allowed you to survive. But to cling to them now is to remain small when your soul longs to expand. The shadow does not vanish when unmasked. It transforms. What was once a source of shame becomes a reservoir of power. The fear of rejection becomes courage. The fear of anger becomes fire. The fear of abandonment becomes sovereignty. The Stoics called this transformation fortitude. Epictetus taught that you cannot control the blows life delivers, but you can control how you meet them. And here lies the truth. Tests will always return. The world will always hold up opportunities for you to betray yourself. But every time you refuse, you build fortitude. You become less fragile, less dependent on others to define your worth. You discover that dignity is not something given, it is something you protect. Each refusal to self-abandon is a stone laid upon the foundation of your inner citadel. In time, that citadel becomes unshakable. Your body, once silenced, now speaks with authority. The oracle within no longer whispers in desperation. She commands with calm certainty. You walk into a room and feel instantly what belongs to you and what does not. You speak and your words carry weight because they emerge from alignment. People sense that you are not swayed by performance, that you cannot be seduced by appearances. This steadiness unsettles those who thrive on confusion, but it magnetizes those who crave authenticity. Yet sovereignty is not about dominance. It is not the loudest voice nor the sharpest weapon. It is quiet authority. It is the power of a river carving stone, not by force but by persistence. Sovereignty means you no longer chase, beg, or prove. You choose. You walk away when it is false. You stay when it is real. And because you no longer betray yourself, you no longer demand that others betray themselves for you. Sovereignty breeds sovereignty. It frees not only you, but those who stand in your presence. This is where the silent oracle fully reveals herself. She was never merely a warning system against danger. She is also the compass toward destiny. She directs you not only away from what harms, but toward what fulfills. Every contraction and expansion, every knot and softening, every tremor of fear and flutter of joy, these are her directions. He speaks not in language but in resonance. To follow her is to walk the path designed for you, not the one carved by others. This is individuation lived, not as theory but as embodiment. And embodiment is the final alchemy. For too long, wisdom was sought in books, in teachers, in doctrines. But your truest teacher has always been within your skin. The oracle does not lie, cannot be corrupted, does not flatter. She simply reveals. And the more you trust her, the more you discover that life is not a series of random events, but a dialogue between your soul and the world. Each sensation is a message. Each reaction is a clue. Each test is a question. Will you honor or betray? As this realization deepens, a new kind of fear arises, not of danger but of possibility. What if you truly trusted this compass in every decision, every relationship, every step? What if you surrendered to the oracle without resistance, no longer arguing with her signals, no longer bargaining with your body's truth? The life you know would dissolve. A greater life would begin. But do you dare to let it? To dare is to step into the unknown, the place where safety no longer comes from control but from trust. Trust not in appearances, not in promises, not in others' approval, but in the ancient wisdom woven into your very body. This is the leap the silent oracle demands. She does not guarantee ease. She guarantees truth. And truth, though it may strip away illusions, always leaves you freer than before. Freedom is not always comfortable. It may mean walking away from relationships that once defined you. It may mean outgrowing circles where your silence was the price of belonging. It may mean sitting alone at first, stripped of false safety, naked in sovereignty. But this solitude is not emptiness. It is the space where your real life gathers, the sacred ground upon which new bonds are built. Solitude is the crucible where self-betrayal dies and self-trust is born. Jung saw individuation as a journey into the self, a descent into the depths where shadow and light unite. The oracle is your guide in this descent. She takes you into the body, into the rawness of sensation, into the truths the ego fears to name. She asks you to sit with discomfort without numbing, to face longing without shame, to honor both the wound and the desire. For within both lies your path to wholeness. What you fear most holds the key to your becoming. The Stoics echo this in their call to face life as it is, not as you wish it to be. They taught that suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our refusal to accept them. Your body already accepts. It reacts honestly to what is, not to what you wish. It contracts when threatened, expands when safe, longs when resonance appears. To follow it is to stop fighting reality and to begin moving with it. This is the essence of wisdom, not to control life, but to cooperate with truth. And when you cooperate with truth, life begins to reorder itself around you. The people who drain you fall away, unable to withstand the clarity of your boundaries. The opportunities that once lured you with hollow promises lose their shine. In their place arise connections, spaces, and paths that feel alive in your bones. You do not chase them. They arrive as resonance. The more you trust your body, the more your outer world begins to reflect your inner alignment. This alignment radiates in ways others cannot ignore. They sense it in your presence, in the steadiness of your gaze, in the quiet certainty of your choices. You no longer need to defend or explain yourself. Your authority is not in your words, but in your being. This is the authority of the sovereign woman, the one who embodies both the silent oracle and the shadowed flame, who walks with clarity in one hand and compassion in the other. She is not untouchable, but she is unshakable. And yet, sovereignty does not end in isolation. Its purpose is not to wall you off, but to root you so deeply in yourself that you can finally connect without fear. For only when you no longer betray yourself can you offer true intimacy to another. Only when you no longer demand rescue can you meet another as equal. Only when you no longer cling to illusion can you embrace love as it is, messy, imperfect, but real. Sovereignty is not the end of connection. It is its beginning. So the final threshold approaches. If you surrendered fully to this truth, if you lived each day listening to the oracle, honoring the flame, choosing sovereignty. What kind of love, what kind of life, what kind of legacy would you create? Legacy is not built in grand gestures or immortal monuments. It is carved in the unseen choices of each day. The choice to honor a tightening chest instead of dismissing it. The choice to say no when silence would have been easier. The choice to walk away from what corrodes, even if it leaves you standing alone. Legacy is formed not in applause but in integrity. It is not how loudly you lead, but how deeply you refuse to betray yourself. In this sense, sovereignty becomes an inheritance. Every act of self-trust writes a new story into the lineage of women who came before you. They were silenced, they were dismissed. They were trained to doubt what they felt, to shrink their instincts, to abandon their oracle for survival. But in you, something different happens. You listen, you trust, you act. And in doing so, you not only heal yourself, you rewrite the script for those who will follow. Your body becomes the ground where ancestral silence ends and ancestral sovereignty begins. Jung wrote that individuation is not a private achievement but a service to the collective unconscious. Each soul who becomes whole ripples outward, altering the archetypal field for all. This is why your healing matters. When you honor your body's truth, you do not do so only for yourself. You shift the psychic inheritance of the feminine. You weaken the grip of the pleaser, the victim, the silenced one. You strengthen the presence of the oracle, the flame, the sovereign. Each act of authenticity echoes in the unseen, giving courage to women you may never meet. The Stoics, too, spoke of legacy, not as wealth or fame, but as character. They urged that the only enduring monument is the life lived in accordance with virtue. Your virtue is not perfection, but alignment. It is the refusal to barter truth for comfort. It is the courage to meet life as it is, guided not by fear, but by discernment. This legacy cannot be stolen, cannot be erased. Long after your voice falls silent, the ripple of your sovereignty continues. And what of love? When you embody sovereignty, love transforms. It is no longer a negotiation of wounds, no longer a performance of need. It becomes resonance, a meeting of two sovereign beings who do not consume one another but expand together. Love ceases to be a battlefield of projection and becomes a sanctuary of truth. Your body, once dismissed, now becomes the arbiter of what is real. You know safety not by words spoken, but by the ease in your breath. You know intimacy not by promises, but by the expansion of your chest. This kind of love is rare because it demands maturity. It cannot thrive in the soil of self-betrayal, but when it appears, it is unmistakable. It feels like recognition beyond time, like meeting not just another, but the part of yourself that was always waiting. Such love does not demand that you abandon the oracle, it celebrates her. It does not ask you to dim your flame, it burns alongside it. This is the love of sovereigns, and it begins only when you claim yourself fully. So the journey returns to its beginning. Your body knew she wasn't safe long before your mind did. That truth was always within you, waiting for your recognition. What began as a whisper of unease has become a symphony of sovereignty. The oracle has risen from exile. The flame has been lit. And now the question remains, one final invitation, both a challenge and a blessing. Will you walk forward as the woman who betrays herself, or as the woman who chooses her own worth? Share the moment you felt most empowered in the comments below. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.